be supported under the CHIPS for America Act. Investing in the semiconductor workforce is certainly essential to our country's success as we reshore American manufacturing and maintain the American lead in technological innovations. American manufacturing is near and dear to the heart of many on this committee, and certainly yours truly. Many of us have spent time exploring manufacturing challenges. I do so locally through a program called Manufacturing Monday, where I visit once a week suppliers and small mid-sized manufacturers, geek out with their technology, learn who their workforce is, start to understand what their challenges are, and seek to bring that back to Congress. Sponsoring and championing legislation to strengthen American manufacturing through the Manufacturing USA and Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program have been cornerstones of the work of this committee and certainly this subcommittee. And many of us are also a part of the Democratic Manufacturing Working Group that continues to usher in legislation to support the American advanced manufacturing sector. So it's no doubt that manufacturing is the lifeblood of the American economy. The CHIPS for America Act, enacted in 2020 through an authorization, will help revitalize American semiconductor manufacturing through a whole of government approach. The authorization to the Department of Commerce is to create several key programs to grow domestic capacity in microelectronics. Funding for the programs included in the America Competes Act, which passed the House of Representatives earlier this month and is waiting for final passage. When implemented, the programs are estimated to create more than 40,000 new semiconductor jobs, making today's hearing very timely. The CHIPS Act addressed the workforce as a key component of our authorized programs. But today's hearing is also not bound by what's just exclusively in the CHIPS Act. We're taking a higher level look at challenges and opportunities to build and expand the semiconductor workforce, certainly exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion, to have an equitable workforce that seeks to bring in American talent from all corridors of this country, something that we have explored at length in previous committee hearings as it pertains to the NSF for the Future Act. Semiconductor manufacturing jobs are good, high-paying careers. The semiconductor industry hires from a wide range of educational backgrounds. That's key, a wide range of educational backgrounds, with about half of the current workforce holding an associate's degree. Semiconductor employees across all education levels make about 65% more than their peers in other sectors. These are also steady and safe careers with ample room for growth and widely transferable skills. Yet we have heard from industry and educators alike about how students, veterans, other displaced workers just are not aware of semiconductor careers, and so they do not pursue the training needed to enter this field. I am wondering today, and I hope we do hear today, how Congress can not only help raise awareness and inspire more workers to enter into this field, but to also think about the programs, career and technical education that are going to be essential to revitalizing this workforce across all education levels to meet current workforce needs. Today, we will also explore how to build and sustain more educational and training programs across the board, certainly some that Congress touches, as well as other public-private partnership programs and initiatives taking place at the charitable and foundation level. We certainly have an incredible and seasoned panel here with us today who have worked through many of the issues firsthand. Collectively, they have created community college and hands-on capstone certificates, apprenticeship and veteran training programs, developed K-12 outreach, and led cutting-edge research programs. Each of these components will be necessary to build the American semiconductor workforce of our future. And as a reminder, folks, We invented this industry. We innovated this industry, and it is ours for the taking and to employ people in. So thank you again to our witnesses for being here today. I, among many of my colleagues, look forward to your insightful testimony. And with that, the chair is going to recognize my dear friend and good colleague from the state of Iowa, Mr. Feenstra, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens. And before I begin discussing today's hearing, I would first like to say how thrilled I am to be named the new ranking member of Research and Technology Subcommittee. I am truly grateful to Ranking Member Lucas for asking me to serve in this role. As I take this new responsibility, I look forward to continuing the tradition of my predecessors, Ranking Member Waltz, Ranking Member Baird, in working in a productive and bipartisan manner. And Chairwoman Stevens, I hope that we can continue to build on our friendship and work together to deliver on the important matters before this subcommittee, like the focus of today's hearing. Today, we will be examining how our U.S. workforce can meet the current and future demands of domestic advanced manufacturing in the semiconductor sector. I appreciate each of our witnesses for taking the time to speak with us today and sharing their experience. I suspect every American has been impacted in some way by the global supply chain disruption for semiconductors or chips. Semiconductors have grown to become an essential part of our modern lives. In Iowa, they're nearly in everything that we do, from our tractors to our semi-trucks to our smartphones. With such an important industry, we are making a mistake in keeping so much of our manufacturing capacity offshore. The U.S. share of global semiconductor manufacturing decreased from 37% in 1990 to just 12% today. The CHIPS for America Act is bipartisan, bicameral effort to reestablish America's leadership in semiconductor chip manufacturing. Funding the CHIPS Act should be the top priority for Congress. We can and should pass this funding cleanly. Instead, 2 weeks ago, the Speaker used the CHIPS Act along with 12 other bipartisan SST bills to move the Partisan Competes Act through the House. A partisan super bill is not the way to get this important legislation done. Relying on offshore manufacturing has led to supply chain bottlenecks, a rising cost of materials, and a decrease of American influence worldwide. We must ensure that the United States is a leader in producing semiconductors to bolster our national security and decrease the influence of the Chinese Communist Party worldwide. China continues to make record-breaking investments in R&D and the semiconductor industry. By funding the CHIPS Act, the United States can help to solidify international leadership in advanced manufacturing for years to come. The CHIPS Act will likely generate tens of thousands of new manufacturing jobs in both high-skilled and trade-focused roles. This becomes as manufacturing companies are already facing difficulty finding skilled workers. Meeting the growing demand for the skilled workforce will be a critical factor in successfully growing our semiconductor sector. Today, we will examine how the manufacturing industry, community colleges, and higher education institutes can work together collaboratively to solve these problems. I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses and the panel on the ideas that they have to build out the STEM pipeline in this space and how we should be thinking about leveraging existing partnerships. I am particularly interested in how we can capitalize on the expertise of our military veterans and encourage industry to tap into this talent pool. The CHIPS Act is a great step toward American investment in the semiconductor industry, but it's only the first step. The committee should continue to consider how we are connecting Americans with these good, high-wage STEM jobs across our country. We are at a pivotal moment where Americans are thinking about a career change, and this conversation about workforce opportunities could not be more timely. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you, Representative Feenstra, and again, welcome to the role as ranking member of the BEST Subcommittee on House Science, Space, and Technology Research and Tech. Thank you for your introductory remarks. And at this time, I would just like to take a minute to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Ms. Shari Liss, the Executive Director of the SEMI Foundation. The foundation focuses on workforce development programs and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, supporting more than 2,400 companies within the microelectronics industry. Prior to her role at the foundation, she served as the CEO of Ignited, a STEM teacher professional development organization, and as a teacher and curriculum developer, serving in a variety of positions with a focus on mathematics and at-risk students. Our next witness is Dr. Osama Awadelkarim. He is the UNESCO Chair for Building Innovation and Manufacturing Capacities through Advanced Technology Education and Professor of Engineering Science and Mechanics at the University, at Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Awadelkarim also serves as the Director of the Center for Nanotechnology Education and Utilization and the National Science Foundation Nanotechnology Applications and Career Knowledge Resource Center. His education contributions focus on nanotechnology, workforce development, and on nanotechnology secondary and post-secondary education. His research interests are in electronic materials and devices. Our third witness is Dr. Tsu-Jae Liu. Dr. Liu is the Dean of the College of Engineering and the Roy W. Carlson Professor of Engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. Since joining UC Berkeley in 1996, she has taught and conducted research on semiconductor logic and memory devices and technology. As Dean, Dr. Liu has bolstered programs to support the academic success and well-being of both undergraduate and graduate engineering students. Throughout her career, she is actively engaged in efforts to diversify the K-12 pipeline to engineering degree programs to support the success of women and students from underrepresented minority groups and first-generation college students, and to increase the diversity of engineering graduate students and faculty. And we do have our ranking member of the full committee on here today, which I noticed Mr. Frank Lucas. And so I would at this time like to turn the, before we hear from our witnesses, and thank you for indulging their incredible backgrounds, we will hear from Mr. Lucas for an opening statement. We do not have our full committee chairwoman, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson with us. So we'll hear from Mr. Lucas and then we'll go to witness testimony. So with that, Mr. Lucas, an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, and I appreciate the traditional courtesy and for holding this hearing this morning. I'm thrilled to welcome Representative Feenstra to the first hearing as ranking member of the Science and of the Research and Technology Committee. In his time on the Science Committee, Representative Feenstra has already shown leadership on critical issues and authored legislation to help protect our research from foreign theft, expand research and the development of biofuels, and improving bioengineering. He understands the innovative science and technology are key to growing the American economy. I would also like to thank Representative Waltz for his service. He did a tremendous job developing a bipartisan legislative package to double down on our investments in basic research, improve U.S. research security, and set a strategic course for American science and technology development. I wish him well in his leadership role in the Armed Services Committee. Again, thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, for letting me start with that sidebar, and now turning to today's hearing. I'm looking forward to examining our current semiconductor education and training pipelines and how we can meet the critical workforce needs of the U.S. microelectronics industry. Microelectronics are critical to how we live and work. They power our phones, they make our cars safer, our homes smarter, and help us store and protect vital information. At a hearing our committee held in December, we heard testimony about the factors contributing to global chip supply chain shortage that is disrupting many industries and affecting consumers. We also heard testimony on the potential threat of countries like China controlling the chip market. Congress is now looking to make investments to increase the domestic production of chips to protect our economy and national security. It took the first steps to address this issue last year by passing the Chips for America Act, which authorized programs to advance U.S. research development, promote industry and government partnerships, and incentivize domestic fabrication of chips. The next step is to provide the necessary funding. While I don't agree with the speaker's strategy to move CHIPS funding through the House as a part of a massive partisan package, I think it's time to come together to address our future domestic chip needs as soon as possible. But our investments in microelectronics research and development and construction of new fabrication facilities will be wasted if we don't have the domestic workforce to support that industry. We must ensure we have a strong STEM workforce in the United States to meet the oncoming demand. If the CHIPS Act is fully funded at the current proposed level, it is estimated to create 42,000 semiconductor jobs. We need to fill them. That demand is even higher when we consider the full spectrum of workers needed to support that industry, from skilled technicians and operators with associate degrees to those with advanced degrees. For example, we'll need scientists to achieve fundamental breakthroughs in microelectronics technology for us to harness the technologies of the future, such as artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum sciences. We will need engineers and software developers to package the microelectronics. We will need technicians to operate the clean rooms at the fabs. Today's hearing should provide examples of innovative training models that not only train new employees, but also retrain and upskill existing members of the workforce, including departing members of the military. I also look forward to hearing how Congress can capitalize on existing federal investments through public-private partnerships and how we can provide our youngest students with the skills to become STEM literate. I strongly believe that to remain competitive, attract job creators, and meet our own needs for an evolving workforce, we need to take full advantage of America's full talent pool, no matter their zip code. I hope our witnesses will be able to provide the insights on how we can assure broad access to semiconductor education and development and solid retention of STEM employees in the semiconductor industry. I want to again thank our witnesses for taking the time to join us today and share their expertise. I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Lucas. There's a lot of dogging of Congress, and one of the beautiful things is that people all across the country in their elected representation can come together in hearings like this and talk about such important topics: workforce development, workforce training in an industry of scale that we are eager to grab hold of. So I hope all of us recognize and take away from this hearing what a ringing and resounding moment this is for our country. So with this, we're going to move to witness testimony. Our witnesses are going to have 5 minutes for their spoken testimony. The written will be submitted to the record. There's some nice printed words here that we all got in advance. But with that, we'll move to Shari Liss for the first 5 minutes of witness testimony.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Lucas, and Ranking Member Feenstra, and members of the Research and Technology Subcommittee, thank you for this incredible opportunity to submit testimony about the critical workforce needs of the U.S. microelectronic manufacturing sector. I hope to be of service in helping you examine the challenges our industry is facing in the microelectronics workforce development realm. I am the Executive Director of the SEMI Foundation, which is a 501c3 arm of SEMI, the global industry association representing the microelectronics manufacturing and design supply chain, connecting over 2,500 member companies. For 20 years, the SEMI Foundation has led SEMI's workforce development and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Microelectronics is an industry making frequent headlines. Supply chain disruptions and chip shortages are impacting virtually every industry and our daily lives. Yet compared to today's software and social media giants, this industry is relatively invisible to most citizens and workers. And that's made workforce development a challenge for decades. Compounding the issue with the Great Resignation, which has led to substantial worker churn within our member companies, the steadily declining US share of global semiconductor capacity, COVID-related supply chain disruptions, and an aging workforce are all important factors. The semiconductor industry's ability to advance and thrive faces serious challenges as it contends with an acute shortage of core skills and talent. Yet another challenge is how to best prepare new workers for the industry and the industry for new workers. Training programs must simultaneously be industry-led and worker-centric, and this process is not simple. Industry must dictate the specific skills and competencies needed for high-demand open jobs, and prospective workers must have support systems in place to complete training and be positioned for success in their new workplaces. Further, companies report that many workers lack the essential soft skills: teamwork, communication, professionalism, time management, conflict resolution, etc., that's needed to thrive in these workplaces. Finally, companies looking to hire a more diverse workforce need to shift their workplaces toward more equitable and inclusive spaces where these new workers will not feel welcome and possibly leave those jobs or the industry entirely. Accomplishing all of the above requires significant investments. Impacted jobs range all across the supply chain, from entry-level positions in manufacturing to advanced technical jobs. Our most current data shows that in the last 12 months, there were 88,000 open jobs just from semi-member companies alone. Our worker shortage is extreme. It's also important to consider the relative invisibility of the microelectronics industry compared to adjacent industries, such as software and social media. Microelectronics companies do not have the same name recognition or allure as companies such as Facebook, well now Meta, Apple, Spotify, or Google, even though our industry enables each of these technologies. The SEMI Foundation has a framework of initiatives that help address these workforce challenges that provides a step-by-step path for leaders to engage with the industry and invest strategically so we can accelerate economic opportunity for all. Some of the elements include our industry image and awareness campaign. This national media and education campaign has two elements: a PBS documentary series highlighting careers in our industry that will reach up to 60 million viewers, and an online career portal which launches this summer. We're also launching the Semi-Career and Apprenticeship Network, or SCAN, designed for the EDA's Good Jobs Challenge. SCAN is a registered apprenticeship program that trains, supports, and places people into quality jobs at committed employers. We also do extensive work with veterans, high school students, and in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion. While these programs are highly beneficial, there are challenges to creating programs that benefit students, employees, and employers. A major issue in ensuring that programs are industry-led, meaning that the programs truly train workers in high-demand skills for currently open jobs, while also being worker-centric, so prospective employees have the support systems they need to complete training and be positioned for success. It's also crucial that workplaces are truly welcoming and embrace active belonging practices. For companies to have the workforce they need and to be innovative, productive, and profitable, they need a far more diverse workforce. That means women returning to work need to feel welcome. That means that people that have taken time off for family caregiving need to feel welcome back, that veterans transitioning to civilian jobs, justice-involved individuals charting new paths. This can only be accomplished through intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. There are many areas where policymakers can help transform our industry for the better. For example, we can increase investments in awareness and visibility of programs to recruit new individuals into the industry, encourage organizations and coalitions to create programs that connect diversity, equity, and inclusion to their workforce efforts, and increase investments in STEM education to provide support for full talent pipeline investment from elementary school all the way through university, with a focus on recruiting, supporting, and retaining underrepresented groups in STEM education. Again, thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And now we'll move to Dr. Awadelkarim. And we got to get you off mute.
Thank you.
There we go.
Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Finstra, and honorable members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to this important hearing. I testify today as the director of the Pennsylvania State University Center for Nanotechnology, Education, and Utilization, known as CNEU. CNEU was established in 1998 to address the needs of the Pennsylvania semiconductor industry for skilled workers, and is dedicated to preparing them across the full range of micro and nano fabrication applications. The resources of CNEU, which includes an outstanding infrastructure of faculty and a clear room dedicated to hands-on student experiences, are focused on the incorporation of nanotechnology into all levels of education. CNEU worked with industry and over 40 Pennsylvania post-secondary institutions to create degree programs incorporating nanoscale fabrication and characterization with an emphasis on semiconductor processing. A strong semiconductor industry must have a workforce skilled in fabrication and characterization at the nanoscale. CNEU pioneered and developed its resource sharing approach, keyword resource sharing, for such an advanced and complex manufacturing, which is forming partnerships between research universities, industry, and community colleges to enable critical hands-on training, as well as expert faculty resources that are not available at community and technical colleges. This resource sharing model established CNEU as a global leader in nanotechnology education and workforce development. Subsequently, in 2008, the Advanced Technological Education Program at the National Science Foundation created the Nanotechnology Applications and Career Knowledge Center, or NAC, at CNEU. NAC has helped to provide needed national micro and nanotechnology education infrastructure for the country by supporting, coordinating, and integrating efforts by research universities and community and technical colleges across the entire US. As a result of NAC's efforts, education and workforce development programs in micro and nanotechnology are growing at universities and community colleges throughout the US. Industry and research universities have an important role to play in assisting workforce development institutions in preparing a skilled semiconductor workforce. This includes sharing infrastructure, advising on the skills needed, providing development opportunities for students and educators, funding and donating functional equipment, and assisting in student recruitment by highlighting the merits and opportunities of joining the microelectronics workforce. In 2008, CNEU piloted the Remotely Accessible Instruments for Nanotechnology, or RAIN network, which enables web access to state-of-the-art characterization, nano-characterization tools for hands-on experience for institutions without these capabilities. To date, 28 RAIN partners have provided close to 600 remote access sessions to over 11,000 students. NAC is currently working with the NSF Micro Nanotechnology Education Center to further expand the RAIN network and its utilization. For the US to fill the gap in the semiconductor workforce, it's important to draw significant numbers of skilled workers from underrepresented ethnic groups or population. Therefore, since 2018, CNEU has collaborated with historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions. To date, and from African American and Hispanic ethnic groups, 45 students, including 22 females, have been trained at CNEU. In addition, 167 other students from the same groups trained remotely. Enhancing the representation of females and other minority groups, including military veterans, is crucial in diversifying and prompting equity and inclusion in the microelectronics workforce. In the past 2 years, CNEU offered the Nano Manufacturing Certificate Program for veterans recruited from military installations in the Tidewater region in Virginia. This work is in progress and includes attempts to expand the program to other branches of the military. During this challenging time to our nation's semiconductor industry, workforce development needs to be effective, efficient, and outcome-driven. This calls for federal government intervention and action to boost the semiconductor manufacturing workforce development. Ways in which government can assist may include implementing the CHIP Act, supporting creation and sustenance of workforce education partnerships, and identifying ways to incentivize industry to become more engaged. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Awadelkarim, and we'll get to Dr. Liu now. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Feenstra, and members of the Research and Technology Subcommittee, thank you very much for inviting me to testify on the topic of strengthening the microelectronics workforce in the United States. I'm Dean of the College of Engineering and a distinguished professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences at the University of California, Berkeley, where I've been leading research on semiconductor devices and technology for over 25 years. Today, I'm speaking in my capacity as an educator and as chair of the Executive Committee for the American Semiconductor Academy Initiative, or ASA Initiative. I'm eager to share with you my perspective on how universities and colleges in the United States can partner with the government and industry to secure America's leadership in semiconductor manufacturing. The current chip shortage has exposed critical supply chain vulnerabilities due to the steady decline in the US share of semiconductor manufacturing capacity, which is only 12% today. Reshoring semiconductor chip manufacturing is critical for our country's long-term economic competitiveness and national security, and it requires investment in workforce development as well as in new manufacturing facilities. Integrated circuits are highly complex systems that can comprise up to 50 billion transistors on a single silicon chip. Designing and building these advanced chips requires teams of highly trained and skilled workers. Now, back in 2017, a survey found that 82% of semiconductor industry executives reported a shortage of qualified job candidates. The challenge of finding qualified workers has only increased since then, and it is now acute at all skill and education levels. It takes years to educate and train a technician or an engineer, particularly for jobs in the microelectronics industry, which is why action is needed now. The ASA initiative aims to grow the talent pool for the microelectronics industry with speed and scale in order to meet the urgent workforce need of a resurging domestic microelectronics industry. The ASA initiative promotes collaboration between universities and community colleges to empower faculty nationwide by sharing curriculum materials and best practices for offering high-quality courses and hands-on training to a diversity of students. It also engages SEMI, which represents over 2,500 member companies across the microelectronics ecosystem, to raise awareness and support students to pursue careers in microelectronics by facilitating facilitating professional development and access to a wide variety of internships and jobs. This university-industry partnership can connect more than 200 universities and community colleges across the country to the more than 1,500 SEMI-member companies with U.S. operations. To truly maximize the scale of this initiative requires leadership and support from the federal government. We estimate that for each $100 million invested per year, approximately 2,000 additional new graduates can be produced annually for the microelectronics industry. The federal government has shown leadership in the past for ambitious initiatives like the Space Race and the Human Genome Project. The recent passage of the COMPETES Act gives me hope that America will soon be better equipped to win the chip race. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I look forward to answering your questions from the subcommittee members.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to begin the first round of questions. The chair is going to recognize herself for 5 minutes. Look, this is an incredibly complex sector of our economy and sector of industry. And listening to what all of you had to say and in your brilliant testimony, as well as reading your written testimony, what we are experiencing with the workforce shortage is something that most members of Congress hear day in and day out in their districts, that they just can't find the employees. I mentioned that I have a program called Manufacturing Monday, where I work really closely and go and visit small to mid-sized manufacturers, and I hear about their workforce shortages. We have also known about a skills gap in this country for a long time that's only been exacerbated by a pandemic. And now, though, we see other industries, home improvement sector, the library, the juice shop, not necessarily being able to get people in to fill all the hours that are available. But specifically for semiconductors and what it takes to work in a fab. I was wondering if our panel could just lend a few minutes to what it takes to go into a fab. You know, the suiting up, the intricacies, the development, and you know, if there's certain personality or if it's that we just haven't explained how essential this is. But when you're walking through the doors, and many of you are at the university level, that's great. And you're doing this, though, at the university level or at the foundation level. So maybe we can start with you, Dr. Liu. You know, what does it take to go work in a fab?
Well, that's a wonderful question, Chairwoman Stevens. You know, I think hands-on experience, learning opportunities is critical in this field. We can learn theoretically how transistors and chips are made, but unless you work in a fab and you understand why we need a clean room in the first place, like why do we need to suit up? It's because these devices are so small. Any bit of dust that might fall on your wafer, as you're processing, can actually reduce your manufacturing yield and cost your company hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think the hands-on training portion is actually uniquely critical to the semiconductor industry. And this is where there's a challenge because it does take time to learn the physics and the math and then the engineering. And then to work in a clean room takes a lot of patience because it does take so many steps to even fabricate some functional circuits.
Yeah, I put on the suit several times myself, and a lot of respect for people who do it day in and day out. And Ms. Liss, maybe you could talk about this as well, particularly in terms of the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts that you have been pursuing. You know, how do we break down those barriers? How do we get hands-on learning? How can the federal government help, if at all?
A great question, and thank you for that. To add to Dr. Liu's points, you know, I think in addition to the hands-on training and the technical skills, we're also looking at building up the soft skills in a number of people. And one of the pathways that we're building right now is a registered apprenticeship model to tackle exactly this challenge for technicians and operators. And in doing that, we're hoping to diversify the talent pipeline. We're hoping to open more doors to more communities and partner closely with community colleges on the ground and technical schools to be able to train folks to walk into those clean rooms. We're already seeing a deficit in those needs, and with chips, we imagine the numbers are going to grow really substantially in the coming years. So trying to open this pathway, diversify the incoming opportunities, and not require 4 years degrees to move into that space is going to be really critical. So we need support to be able to build out those programs. Again, to diversify the talent pipeline for sure is a huge part of this work.
Yeah, and Dr. Awadelkarim, you know, you're joined by a couple of my colleagues from the state of Pennsylvania who I'm sure are going to be very eager to talk to you. But, you know, you've mapped out the presence in your written testimony within the state. And I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the success stories that you've seen.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to underline one thing that is very important. We're very fortunate that we have a dedicated teaching clean room. Penn State has been very generous, you know, in giving us the space and giving us the funds to build a teaching clean room. This is not the case in many research universities. Clean rooms are very expensive to build and very expensive to maintain. So most universities restrict them to research, and they're hardly, students are hardly given opportunities, to actually go into clean rooms and practice hands-on experiences. Having this clean room and having the generous support of the state of Pennsylvania since 1998 all the way to 2012, we were able to bring students and teach them hands-on experiences, students from community colleges, hands-on experiences in this clean room. Now, the first thing that we do when students come and stay at Penn State is we offer them a very specific course on how to deal with the clean room.
Yeah. And why don't we do this, Dr. Awadelkarim, because I'm over my 5 minutes. And as I mentioned, we do have some colleagues on who are from your state, and I'm sure they would like to brag on what you've talked about. So why don't I yield back and pass this over to my colleague, the ranking member, Congressman Feenstra, for 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank each one of our expert witnesses. I mean, you've provided incredible testimony and insightful thoughts on these issues, and it's just impressive to hear each one of you. To follow up with you, Dr. Awadelkarim, in your testimony, you state that the goal of the Centers for Nanotechnology Applications and Career Knowledge is to replicate the success of your programs nationwide by supporting and integrating efforts by community and technical colleges across the country to provide nanotechnology workforce education. So, given this experience, do you think the federal government is making effective and efficient investments in the nanofabrication education and training?
Actually, I was, this just a follow-up to my answer, to Chairwoman Stevens. Pennsylvania was very critical in supporting us and allowing us to do this, for Pennsylvania, community colleges. However, the NSF has picked up Pennsylvania experience and then supported us since 2012. Overall, we were able to graduate over 1,000 students out of this, nano manufacturing initiative that we have. So I can say that the federal government, through the NSF, has been very generous in providing support. The support actually primarily goes to bringing the students over here and maintaining them while they are here. But I think to actually generalize or replicate this experience of ours throughout the United States, more funds are clearly needed, to do this. And we have built some similar partnerships throughout the United States, which can actually do the same.
Right. I agree 100%. Thank you. Dr. Liu, thank you for your testimony on the American Semiconductor Academy. As we look to expand our workforce while being good stewards of taxpayer money, what steps would you take to ensure the ASA is capitalizing on the federal investments already made, like those at NAC? Do you have a plan for leveraging those investments while ensuring there's no duplication of efforts?
Well, absolutely. Thank you for that excellent question, Ranking Members Feenstra. As Professor Awadelkarim has mentioned, there are universities in the United States which have been supported by the federal government to establish these very expensive and sophisticated facilities, cleaning facilities to train students. And so the ASA really is advocating for increasing accessibility of those facilities. So first of all, modernization, because the field of microelectronics is a rapidly evolving field, right? The technology increases in capability exponentially. The new equipment is invented every year. So we'd like to upgrade the existing facilities and then open them up so that they have greater, so more students, a greater diversity of students can learn in those facilities. But how do you even coordinate that? So federal investment is needed to help us coordinate and leverage the existing investments.
Right. And do you see the coordination? I look at the federal programs like the NSF, the National Labs, Department of Commerce. Do you see problems coordinating there, or is that pretty seamless?
I think it's pretty seamless because the facilities are standalone. They operate. They do get funding from multiple sources. I think this is a multi-agency opportunity to work together to support the universities to be able to help more students across the country. Yes, yeah. I think that's the best use of our taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Ms. Liss, can you please speak on how the American Semiconductor Academy can play a role in connecting academia and industry to ensure students are being trained with the skill sets needed by the industry? I think there's so much going on right now, and I'm just wondering how we can do this.
Thank you. That's a great question, and we're very excited about our partnership with Dr. Liu and the ASA. We've been talking a lot about the ability to connect industry members to the education system more seamlessly and to have input on the needs, the really tremendous and critical needs that we're not filling within the workforce from the education standpoint in terms of what courses, curriculum, degrees are needed to be able to fill all of the jobs that are coming. And our partnership is really beautiful in a lot of ways, because a lot of our work at the SEMI Foundation is building the pipeline K-12, building apprenticeship models, partnering with community college system, and now also helping to serve into the university system as well. So I think by connecting industry voices to the university system, we'll be able to better identify the competencies and skills that are needed in order to be successful in this industry.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you. And I yield back. Thanks for each of your comments.
Great. Thank you. And now we will hear from Congresswoman Ross for 5 minutes of questioning.
Great. I got to go early. Thank you so much. And this is a terrific panel. And I just have to share this. I'm from North Carolina, from the Research Triangle area. And before I came to this committee meeting, I went to Wake Tech Community College, and they just got a $1.4 million NSF grant to allow Wake Tech students to do hands-on research, have mentors, get paid apprenticeships, get communication skills, and be able to work in cutting edge areas. And the student who we talked to was talking about antimicrobial resistance, which is very important for the biotech industry at Wake Tech. But when I talked to the president of Wake Tech, he said if there was this kind of NSF grant for microelectronics, Wake Tech would be applying for it in a heartbeat. And we have a new East Wake Tech campus that's opening up soon, focusing on manufacturing. And so I think maybe starting with Ms. Liss, but I'd like to hear from all of the panelists whether or not, since we're going to be giving NSF some more money, and we've got this money for semiconductors, whether this type of program where we marry all of these things, and in addition, several of our colleges and universities would be involved, including land grant and HBCUs, if people wanted to go beyond their apprenticeship and get higher education. Tell me whether you think we should set up these programs, all across the country, or whether this works. And let's start with Ms. Liss, and then maybe Dr. Liu, and then keep going around.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And yes, and yes. So I think what we're trying to do is build these STEM ecosystems that can support this industry in each of the regions that we're focused on. In our Good Jobs Challenge grant ask that we just submitted, it was building an ecosystem in California and Arizona as 2 starting points. But we've already been poached by multiple states to do similar and expand the work. I think bringing together workforce development boards, K-12 education, community colleges, universities, economic councils, state level legislators is going to be really critical in building things that will help scale and be supported and continue to be maintainable, I think, and sustainable. I think that's going to be the most critical part of this work, is bringing together all of these voices to make sure that we're adding real value to this industry and finding the folks that can make the most difference in the world through it. So yes, absolutely. I love that grant was awarded, and we're doing similar work. Thank you.
Dr. Liu, and then Dr. Awadelkarim.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ross. It's wonderful. Congratulations on Wake Tech's success in securing that grant. I echo everything that Ms. Liss said, and I just would like to add that at Berkeley, we have had programs funded by the NSF. We call it Transfer to Excellence, to support community college students to come to Berkeley, because we have the facilities to gain research experiences during the summertime. But I think the key there is to expose them, to increase awareness of this field, and to understand that there are good jobs here, and they can make a tremendous impact on society, positive impact. And then that incentivizes them to go back, take their courses more seriously, and even maybe not even aim for technician roles, but transfer to the university and aim for a higher level professional degrees. So I think a lot of it is increasing awareness and attracting students and motivating them to stick with it, right? It does take many years, and it's not easy. It's rigorous education that they must go through. So programs like that, I think indeed should be replicated. We should share those best practices across the nation.
Maybe what I always feel very happy, when I hear that more money is going to the Advanced Technological Education Program in the NSF. And that seems to be what's going to happen here. So that is very encouraging step. I think the ATE program has done a lot in actually propagating, nanofabrication and semiconductor manufacturing across the community colleges. And now the NSF has Micro and Nanotechnology Education Center, which is a national center. And we in NAC are working very closely with this center that is trying to do the same thing. In other words, disseminate semiconductor education throughout. I think the suggestion that I will make is trying to get into this program or to this pool of money, universities and industries, together with community colleges in kind of partnerships, because they need each other and they need the infrastructure that is provided by industry and research universities, so that this, approach that we prove very successful, resource sharing could actually flourish. So if that kind of funding stream is created, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Right. And with that, we are going to hear from Congressman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens and Ranking Member Feenstra for holding this hearing today. Additionally, thank you to our witnesses for sharing their expertise on these important topics. As we've heard from all of our witnesses, cannot be underscored enough how important chips are in day-to-day American life. We see that in every sector of the economy, and it's disheartening to hear that over the course of the past 3 decades, manufacturing of these chips has been offshore, and even more troublesome to adversaries like China. On the positive side, of course, I was thrilled to learn that Intel Corporation has chosen my home state of Ohio as the future home of semiconductor manufacturing facilities. A project will generate more than 20,000 jobs projected. I think it'll be higher when we look at downstream jobs in Ohio, and reaffirm our stance as a hub for manufacturing and innovation. I can almost think of no greater economic development tool than bringing our chip manufacturing back home to the United States. But of course, they should all come to Ohio. Dr. Awadelkarim, in your testimony, you highlighted the important collaboration between Penn State, Pennsylvania community colleges, and other 2-year degree granting institutions. How would a state like Ohio or any other state benefit from these sorts of collaborations going forward?
Okay, the reason that our initiative was only Pennsylvania based is because of the funding of the state of Pennsylvania, which restrict us to only work with community colleges in Pennsylvania. However, through the NSF, we're also working with community colleges in Ohio. I could certainly, write, give answers, to the kind of community written answer to community colleges that we work with in Ohio, but NAC works across the entire United States. And so we're able to work with Ohio. But the biggest issue is for the students to come to Penn State. That involves a high cost for them. And then they need to be able to find the funds so as to do that. So we prefer that they work with neighboring universities, research universities that can provide that experiences to them.
Yeah, and what is it about the partnership that works well? And I'm asking from the standpoint of trying to figure out, what should all of our states be thinking about in order to duplicate the success that you've had in Pennsylvania? What are those key things that we should be doing more of?
Well, I would say the number one thing is funding, of course, for students, to be able to attend. That's one thing. The other thing is to propagate the experience and replicate it. In other words, get some interested research universities and industries that are able to do this. And now you're saying that Intel is moving to Ohio. That's a big blessing, because then Intel can play a crucial role, in actually building that partnership. simply because of the need, for the skilled workforce.
Yeah, with that, I want to switch to Ms. Liss. Piggybacking off that, we know that there's not currently enough people skilled to fill these jobs, even though they're great jobs. Has the Semi Foundation begun to look at programs that could increase the pipeline, and how should we think about spreading awareness in particular for our students?
Yeah, all of our programs are about increasing the talent pipeline and looking at this desperate situation in terms of workforce need. And we actually are about to launch this very significant image and awareness campaign around the industry. The website tool that we're about to launch in June will be a skills analysis and skills gap analysis tool for students, for veterans, for women returning to work. It'll tell the stories of the industry. It will show the breadth and depth of the opportunities. It will link to all the universities and community colleges that are offering content and curriculum and degrees in this space. And it is to raise awareness about the industry. And I don't know if you've talked to high school students or even community college students or university students recently, but if you ask them if they know anything about the semiconductor industry, they will know everything on their phone, but not how it works. And so we need to change that dynamic. And from an image perspective, the image is only the white coat and the clean rooms, although that's part of it. There's so much other opportunity within the industry. So being able to tell the story in a way that's exciting and sexy for kids is going to be really critical in building the workforce.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. And the one thing that I like that we're highlighting in this panel is, or in this hearing, is that the skills need to exist across a whole host of demographics and educational backgrounds, right? It's not just PhDs, four-year college. Let's get community colleges, let's get the skilled trades involved and make sure that we have everything we need to really restart chip manufacturing here in the United States. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if it's okay, I'm already talking to folks in Ohio.
Wonderful. Well, I love to hear that.
There's a lot of interest.
There absolutely is. And with that, I will yield back to Madam Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to hear from my friend and colleague, Congressman Tonko. You're a friend and colleague too, Congressman Gonzalez. So.
Okay, Chair Stevens, can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member Feenstra, and the witnesses for being here today. At the heart of the education and workforce engine driving the U.S. microelectronics industry are our colleges and universities. If we as a nation intend to reassert ourselves as a global leader in chip manufacturing, we definitely need a well-funded and sustained national strategy, a strategy that engages our community colleges, our four-year colleges, and research universities with industry on a large enough scale to make a real impact. New York's capital region is home to prime examples of higher ed institutions with access to cutting-edge fabrication facilities for firsthand learning opportunities. The Albany Nanotech complex, for example, is the most advanced publicly owned semiconductor R&D facility in our United States and supports workforce development at all levels. Tech Valley High School is located at that site. It has ongoing programs with community colleges for technician training, and it coordinates with all 64 of our SUNY campuses to increase opportunities in a variety of career paths, from engineering to process operators and maintenance technicians. Global Foundries, also in my district, established the first United States Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program in the semiconductor industry at its Malta, New York headquarters. It's an 18-month maintenance technician apprenticeship program with an on-the-job training, instructor-led classes, web-based courses, and college courses in partnership with Hudson Valley Community College and other nearby schools. Learning opportunities like these great capital region examples enable direct transitioning to the semiconductor manufacturing workforce and should be encouraged and replicated throughout the country. As you may be aware, the House passed the Microelectronics Research for Energy Innovation Act as part of the broader America Competes Act of 2022. I led this bill in partnership with my colleague, Mr. Elsie, and it would authorize an effort to leverage the Department of Energy's capabilities, including the DOE national labs and their partners in industry and academia, to tackle foundational challenges in the scientific areas relevant to microelectronics. Among the provisions included in the Micro Act are directives to support workforce development efforts related to microelectronics through scholarships, fellowships, education, and public outreach activities, hands-on research and equipment training programs, and indeed certificate programs. So Dr. Luke, can you comment on how the national labs might serve as unique venues for the type of activity authorized in the Micro Act?
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Tonko. And it's very inspiring, the example of the New York State, Albany, the partnership between government and industry and universities and colleges is really a model, I think, that we will indeed do need to replicate in other parts of the country, including Ohio, Texas, Arizona, and so on. So the Department of Energy, of course, has invested in microelectronics because they need the world's best computers, right, for their work. And so the national labs also serve as a resource for our country to train future engineers and technicians, perhaps for some more aiming for defense industry careers. So they definitely play a complementary role to universities in offering hands-on practical skills training that actually can also help to incentivize students to stick with it and pursue these careers, because a lot of the students, once they take a course in computer science and have an internship there, they're hooked. We need to give them internships early. And so this is why we need to work together, network. How do we replicate the model in Albany? Well, we need a network to share that through. And so this is what we'd like to do as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your support.
Oh, thank you. And would either of our other two witnesses want to comment?
Sure. The hub in New York is one of the most talked about and hopefully replicated models around meeting with Hudson Valley Community College, SUNY Poly, trying to figure out how we can build upon the successes that are happening there, and with Global Foundries as well in terms of the apprenticeship model that they've launched so successfully. So it is about taking best practices and hoping to replicate that work and seeing that really come to fruition across the country. I just want to give my other panelists a moment as well, but thank you.
Thank you so much.
I may also comment, we have a lot of work ongoing with Albany, SUNY Albany. And SUNY Albany has a Nanotech Center, which is Northeast Advanced Technological Center, again funded by the NSF. And we've been working together for several years now, more than 10 years. And we're still, engaged with them. I think the investment that the state of New York has put, on boosting semiconductor workforce and training, I think it was it's commended, and we certainly work with them in many areas.
Thank you so much. And Madam Chair, I'll just tell you that it's an honor to have worked with this as the New York State Assembly Chair on Energy when I was there in that body, and as the leader at NYSERDA, the State Energy Research and Development Authority, and now in Congress. So it's been a great bit of collaboration, and very proud of it, and hope we can continue to expand upon it and spread it across the country. And thank you for your leadership with the subcommittee. I yield back.
All right, and now we will hear from Dr. Baird for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know you have a background in the auto industry, so that makes this this hearing even more significant to you. Then I want to congratulate my colleague, Representative Feenstra. And he mentioned agriculture, and he mentioned the equipment. It's amazing to me that we have such sophisticated equipment today to be able to do precision agriculture, and it's going to be so important down the road to be able to provide food and fiber for the world that we do. And so if you have not ever been to a Farm Progress show, I think Randy would tell you that that's a good place to see all kinds of technology in place and in action, and it requires all these semiconductors to do it. But, this hearing, and I think it's really important, we have focused on making sure that we try to energize and attract young people into the industry. And I can tell you this, one of the avenues that I see in my district has been the community colleges, and many of you mentioned the community colleges, but they're right next to in those communities to industries, and they've been working across the board with one another to provide the training that is needed for that industry from that community college. And then in that same vein, I think it takes leadership at the universities as well. And so my question to all of you is, do you think that we have sufficient staffing at, say, Purdue or Berkeley or Penn State? I think I got them all in there from here anyway, but do you think we've got enough faculty currently on staff to try to help this grow that has the base, like Purdue's got a lot of engineering and a lot of this could move across. And so we might have a sufficient number of faculty to at least expand on this. So my question goes to all the witnesses. And so Dr. Liu, I guess we'll start with you.
Right. Thank you so much, Congressman Baird. That's an excellent question. It's something we haven't talked about yet. It is true that there will be a need for more faculty who are empowered to teach cutting edge microelectronics curriculum. And many of the faculty members who teach in this area today will be retiring in the near future. And so I think there is a need. So part of that $100 million a year investment that I mentioned earlier does appropriate funding for universities to incentivize universities to prioritize hiring of faculty in our field. Because today, a lot of universities are looking to hire faculty like in computing or so on, because there's such huge demand for that, for those workers as well. So I think some incentives for universities to prioritize hiring of faculty in microelectronics and to help them start up research programs. So a little bit of investment is definitely needed there. And we can do the same at community colleges as well. So I agree that is a need. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to hear. Dr. Liss?
I agree with everything that Dr. Liu just said. As we're watching the technology shift and change too, there's going to be new trainings that are going to be needed for the university professors as well as community college professors. It is a concern in the community college space that I'm working with closely on this apprenticeship model and on training our entry-level engineers. There's a lot of concern about keeping up with AI, machine learning, data science, and making sure that we have all of the right professors in place to do all of that. So absolutely the need is going to continue to grow as well on that front.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Awadelkarim?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for that question. Yes, there is a need, of course, for staffing to be able to do this. And in CNEU, we hire our own staff. We have the funding, and so we pay the salaries, etc. So none of Penn State faculty are involved in actually teaching these courses. We have our own staff. So that's one important thing. But I'm very excited about ASA and what is being said here, because it's bringing together industry, universities, and community colleges. And that could be an issue that could be addressed there. And ASA could play a big role, in facilitating that kind of need or demand. And I think it's doable if the proper funding is in place, to do that, and if industry plays an effective role in surmounting that hurdle.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm a strong advocate for the United States of America taking a lead role around the world, and I think we have the talent and the capability, and so having the kind of input we have from you here today helps us make the appropriate decisions on this committee where we can direct dollars to maybe help entice getting that back to our country. So I've got 8 minutes left, Madam Chair, and I'm going to give you 4 of those. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Baird. And with that, we'll hear from Congresswoman Wild.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. To everybody involved in this panel, I represent Pennsylvania's 7th District, covering the Greater Lehigh Valley, where we have a proud tradition of American manufacturing leadership. And when I meet with local manufacturers, no matter what industry we're talking about, they always say that a reliable supply of modern chips is one of their top business needs. I also have a significant semiconductor industry presence in my district. Recently visited the Allentown location of Infinera, a company that designs and assembles advanced microelectronics. And my district is a major site for Advantest, an automatic test equipment provider for the semiconductor industry to validate chip functions. So I have been really proud to support the CHIPS Act and to support fully funding it by passing the America Competes Act. I do believe that Congress must act quickly. This should be a top priority to jumpstart our return to American leadership in semiconductor manufacturing, a capability that is vital to our nation's overall manufacturing ability and to our national security. And welcome in particular, I have to do a shout out to Dr. Awadelkarim. I know I botched your name. I'm so sorry, I tried. Welcome to a fellow Pennsylvanian here. And thank you so much for your work with Penn State. Now, this is in your written testimony, each of you has touched on the importance of on-the-job and apprenticeship training programs, especially for technician training. Advantest, which has a site in my district, has closely followed the work of SEMI and hopes to develop technical apprenticeship programs, possibly as a complement to community college learning to address its workforce needs. Ms. Liss, your written testimony describes SEMI's workforce development initiatives, including apprenticeship models. Based on your experience leading that work, what barriers exist to engaging employers in an apprenticeship model?
That is a great question. Thank you so much. I'm actually working quite closely with Advantest on that project as well, which is wonderful. The barriers for industry engagement is the question. So from
what barriers exist to engaging employers in the apprenticeship model?
Yeah, I think it is essentially a heart and mind shift across the industry. So as a semiconductor industry and working with hundreds of companies all the time, you know, the past has always been hiring folks with 4-year degrees, with PhDs, with master's degrees. Everybody has to be very educated to be successful in this space. At the same time, the industry is saying that we have a real workforce development challenge and we'd like to diversify that workforce. So in order to kind of bridge those two sort of compelling challenges within the industry, we have to start looking at these alternative pathways to hire. So I think from an industry engagement point of view, it's getting people to understand and recognize that these jobs can be filled through an apprenticeship model, through alternative pathways, through technical training, and not necessarily require everybody to hold at least a 4-year degree to be successful. And for me, that's been the greatest learning and from the challenging perspective of working with the industry on that particular model. Everybody agrees it's needed. It's just getting the buy-in.
So are there academic or government services that are needed to complement the on-the-job training piece of this?
Absolutely. So from an academic standpoint, we have to do classroom hours for everybody that goes through an apprenticeship model. We decided to go the registered apprenticeship route because it also supplies wraparound services for workers. It supplies paid community college in several states. So it's very worker-centric focused, which is a fabulous addition if we want to look at retaining talent, right? And so from an academic standpoint, we have to engage the community colleges in this, in addition to the hands-on training component that happens within either the university centers or the industry placements themselves.
Well, I'm very much on the same page with you. My district has 2 fantastic community colleges. We have 14 in all of Pennsylvania. 2 of them are in my district, and they have a wonderful reputation for working with the employers in our region. And I would just, let's see, I have 30 seconds here. I'd just be interested from Dr. Awadelkarim, so sorry, I know I'm really botching that. If you could just address the challenges that institutions, educational institutions face in forming partnerships with these employers.
One of the difficulties actually is the availability of internships and apprenticeship, for the students. There are out there, and students could apply for them, But the number of students that actually would like to do this, to take these opportunities are more, and they outnumber the number of available positions. So if industry could provide, or if some kind of incentive, could come to industry that could provide more of these positions, that of course would be very, very, very welcome, because we try to place those students in internships and apprenticeships, in industry, and that is often very difficult to do. One important part that I should also mention, what about the educators in community colleges themselves? They need fellowships to be able to actually work at industry, because they go back, take this experience and teach back at their community colleges. And that is one big part of our professional development program that we do for educators of community colleges. I haven't discussed that in my oral statement, but I've written quite a bit on that on the written statement too.
Well, thank you so much. My time is definitely up. I could talk about this all day. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Great questions. And with that, we'll hear from Congressman Elzy.
Hey, Madam Chair, thank you for recognizing me. I didn't have any questions today. Thank you to all the witnesses for coming today. It's been an interesting conversation and much needed. So thank you. I yield back.
Madam Chair, I think they're waiting on you.
All right, I appear to have a sound issue. Is Congressman Elzy asking 5 minutes of questions right now?
No,
or did he yield?
I yield back.
Okay, he said no questions. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my sound went out. So with that, we will hear from Dr. Bill Foster from Illinois for 5 minutes of questions. Thank you, Mr. Elzy. Sorry about that. The sound cut right out. But yeah, now we can hear from Chair. Dr. Foster.
Yeah, am I audible and visible here? Okay. Well, one of the advantages of Zooming from someone's like private study den is that I accumulate some of my stuff here. So here is my stuff from my previous careers. This is a circuit board that I probably spent a week of my life wiring that has about 250 integrated circuits on about 4,000 wires that I connected and debugged the thing. It was a 40 megahertz 35-stage digital pipeline processor that was used to discover the top quark, the heaviest known form of matter. But during my and so I was very involved in actually using electronic circuits. But when I look at that circuit today, I can see the drift of the chip manufacturing business going offshore. This was built in about 1985, and most of the chips there are Texas Instruments, Motorola, Signetics. Yeah, I see Dr. Liu has some name recognition for those old great brands. And Cypress Semiconductor, which I believe is still actually not fabless at this point, if I'm correct about it. But that's not true. A lot of those companies have disappeared, been acquired, or are fabless and do their manufacturing offshore. And so but 10 years before that, back in 75, when I was starting my company with my little brother, we had the bright idea of using the newly invented microprocessor to control theater stage lighting, which had not been done before. And so we actually bought the second microprocessor ever built from the startup called Intel. And the main memory was the Intel 2102 dynamic RAM. Our company's phone number today is 4116, the last four digits. For the MOSTEC MK4116 16,000-bit dynamic RAM, which seemed infinite at the time. I just watched with a very heavy heart watching the dynamic RAM business go offshore, first to Japan, then Korea, now a big part of it to Taiwan and China. And so trying to understand what we should have done. And it's not just integrated circuits, it is passives. When we were starting our company, if you wanted to precision crystal oscillators, you went to Connor Winfield in the Illinois 11th District, and now there are many offshore vendors they compete with. If you wanted inductors, precision inductors, you went to Coilcraft, and now they're who do, I think, a big part of their manufacturing offshore. And so, we have to keep our eyes on passives and packaging as surely as we do on just chips themselves. But also, during my time at Fermilab, after a while, it became clear that in order to do the experiments we needed to do, we had to design and build our own ICs. And so I don't want to overclaim, but I think I'm the only member of Congress that's designed 10 integrated circuits and had them all work the first time. And I also did a lot of supervising of engineers who, made the final versions of these designs. And so, Dr. Liu, you also supervised these engineers. And one of the things that I was struck by is it was the thing that got them going is, this is my chip. And, we at that time had access to something called Moses, which I take it has kind of disappeared, which is a way that you used to be able to get for not very much money, a small number of a new chip design. And the fact that that too has disappeared, I think really takes the wind out of getting young engineers excited about this. So I was wondering, what are the things that have been tried to keep multi-project wafers going that would let graduate students or even undergrads have access and actually build their own chip and get that thrill of seeing the chip they designed work?
Wow, that's a wonderful question, Congressman Foster and Dr. Foster. I actually appreciate that engineers can also contribute to the leadership of our country. So it's a pleasure to engage with you in conversation. Your question was about the multi-chip or multi-project wafer programs. So it turns out that Intel is in the process, it actually offers a multi-project wafer kind of service. They call it the University Shuttle. But part of the challenge is that even though they offer space on the chips so students can design and see their chips fabricated and eventually test them, the sophistication of the chips has grown exponentially since you were a student, even though it's not that long ago. And so the software tools that have evolved to allow people to design billion component or even 1,000 component products essentially within a few weeks of a semester. The software tools are actually are needed to be able to design these chips today. And that's where accessibility is a challenge, because the computing systems you need, the cloud computing credits you need to even design a chip because it's so complex, it poses a barrier. So this is one of the challenges that we would like to address with the ASA network. At Berkeley, we actually have designed a course where students within one semester can tape out a chip, design a chip and send it to Intel to have it fabricated in the 16 nanometer generation technology, which is pretty advanced. We would like to be able to package that course and allow other faculty at other universities to be able to teach that course. However, software companies, the electronic design automation companies, have to work with us to make their software tools broadly accessible. And that's why the ASA should also involve an online platform that's shared across the nation to give students accessibility to those design tools in order to be able to actually have their chips fabricated by companies like Intel.
Okay, and I guess I understand we're having a second round of questions, and I'll press further on this because we ought to find a way that we can make a better economic model for getting young kids, access to be able to build their own chip.
Yes, thank you.
Great, that sounds excellent. Thank you, Dr. Foster. And then with that, we'll move to the second round of questions. And it appears as though my sound is maintaining itself. I don't know why the internet went out for just a minute there, but for the next round of questions, I'll begin. And my question for the panel is, in thinking about how we're going to conduct some of the workforce development programs, could you discuss development organizations could contribute to some of the efforts of assisting with the workforce development needs of the CHIPS sector.
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute and I could not hear part of that question.
Ms. Stevens, if you can hear, you cut out for a moment and looks like your connection froze. I tell you what, this is Congressman Randy Feenstra. While she's getting back up, I can ask a Congressman Stevens, would you like to get, you're cutting in and out. So, sorry about that.
I know, I thought I was cutting in and out. I saw you nodding and then I heard our technical team say you cut out. So let me just recap the question. You know, the Department of Commerce put out an RFI in January asking about the workforce development needs of the industry. Very interested to hear how the Department of Commerce, and in full disclosure, I'm a former Department of Commerce appointee over a decade ago. So, you know, not necessarily trying to put anybody on the spot of understanding all the ins and outs of the agency, but how should the department structure the workforce development requirements under the CHIPS program to ensure that they are a true priority and not just a check the box exercise? And with that, how could federal agencies other than Department of Commerce that are a part of our CHIPS legislation, including Department of Energy and National Science Foundation, contribute to these efforts? And that's a open question to all the panelists, and Dr. Lou's nodding, so maybe we start with you, but not to put you on the spot.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, for asking that question. I think many of the programs in the CHIPS Act do mention workforce development, so that speaks to the need that transcends all special programs, and it's an urgent need for the industry itself that exists today. So not only the programs to incentivize growth. So I do think that to make the best use of taxpayer dollars, we really should coordinate and learn and share best practices, you know, from different programs that have been stood up, especially from the NSF. So I think it's a whole of government kind of an opportunity, a multi-agency solution. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
You sort of took the words right out of my mouth, Dr. Liu. But I think this issue is so big and so pressing and so critical that we have to all come together to support the efforts. And although, you know, we have mapped sort of this holistic look at workforce development, we are just one piece of this very giant puzzle. So we're looking at, you know, the government agencies coming together and supporting this really significant need that's going to develop in the coming years, when we already see a need and we just know it's going to accelerate and just continue to grow at least over the next several years. So we're hoping that everybody will work together, as Dr. Liu mentioned, to find solutions to this workforce development challenge. And that was in my response on the RFI as well.
What I could add, you know, to my colleagues, you know, the comments of my colleague, is we have, you know, the model of the ATE, the Advanced Technological Education of the NSF, and how it, you know, it was very successful, you know, in propagating advanced technology across the community colleges. So why not learn from that and then replicate it in Department of Energy and Department of Commerce solicitation with emphasis or focus on semiconductor workforce? So I think that's an experience that we could learn from it, and we could you know, apply it.
You're on mute, Congresswoman.
I'm on my phone. I'm on mute. Thank you, Dr. Awadelkarim. You know, appreciate your getting in there as well. And thank you to the brand new ranking member for stepping in, you know, when the chair has, you know, a little technical glitch. Congressman Feenstra, I'm happy to kick it over to you for 5 more minutes of questions, and thank you for indulging us today.
Congresswoman, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Ms. Liss, can you please elaborate on the semi-vet works? You know, you think many great men and women come out of our military service, highly skilled, but not always with the right credentialing to be recruited by this industry. Could you please elaborate and speak on the semi-vet work how they tackle this challenge and the importance of utilizing this vital talent pool?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. You know, we see military veterans and reservists as a strong and really diverse talent pool that can contribute incredibly to this field. And one of the challenges we face with getting them, that population to get involved is the same thing that I spoke about with students earlier. It's just a lack of understanding of the industry. When I had the opportunity to speak with some service members at Fort Hood a few times, talking about the industry and explaining what we do and who we are as an industry, it was similar to talking to students in some ways, and also convincing folks that they had the incredible strengths that they bring to the table that could be very successful in our industry. We have job fairs, we have resume sharing. We created a vet guide to help our members engage with different bases around the country. We were asked by our member companies to develop tools to help them connect more readily with veterans. So we're really trying to elevate the folks from that part of the sector to enter our workforce because we just see the incredible value they bring.
Well, that's great. I greatly appreciate that. I mean, there's just another talent pool that we need to use. Dr. Liu, I noticed that Iowa State, University of Iowa, and the University of Northern Iowa, which are obviously in my state, are not currently on the list of American Semiconductor Academy University partners. I strongly believe that the success to programs like these across the country is vitally necessary if we're going to meet the vast industry demand and maintain pace with China. What sort of outreach are you currently doing, or do you plan to do in rural communities to ensure that STEM opportunities are available across the country, specifically like this in the Midwest?
That's an excellent question, Ranking Member Feenstra. Absolutely. So in Iowa, there are universities and community colleges, especially, that can be a wonderful pipeline of talent to the industry. And just to clarify, the list of universities that are participating in the ASA initiative are helping to plan it. It always has been intended to be, open and accessible to all universities and community colleges in the United States, because the need is too great. None of us should be trying to seek only to benefit only ourselves. So I think that we would be open to. We would want to reach out to as many faculty across the community college systems in every state, as well as universities across the country. That is the intention. And I'd like to mention here that community colleges are a rich source of talent. I mean, the diversity of students in community colleges, including veterans. I've had a Navy veteran work in my research group because he was at a community college and we had this summer research experience. And after that, he continued in my group as a visiting scholar during the academic year because he learned about the semiconductor research and was hooked. I also wanted to mention that community college and a partnership with industry and universities are important because there's this knowledge network, so framework. So people today were training them how to make sense out of data. They were giving them knowledge, but what we need to stay at the forefront of technology innovation is wisdom. And so this is where university education complements the training and the kinds of activities happening at community colleges and in the industry. We want to cultivate in students a growth mindset. That way, they not only can contribute to the industry, but also help to continue to lead innovation, right? This is where we lead, I think, in the world, and we will lead if we can harness all the diversity of talent in the United States.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dr. Liu. How do you, I mean, this is sort of my area that I'd like to dive into. You talk about quantum computing and AI, and as this continues to grow, do you see, I mean, I'm just looking at a 30,000-foot view. Do you see that we're getting further behind in that truly, expert world compared to other countries globally? I mean, I get a little concerned, or don't you see that necessarily?
I think our country right now is still doing leading research in AI. and in quantum computing. But it's difficult because unfortunately for research, a lot of our students are from other countries, right, in the graduate programs. So this is why it's important to raise the visibility, the awareness that these are really important, impactful careers, and we want to attract more domestic students to our programs.
Thank you so much, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and with that is Congresswoman Ross still with us? Great, go ahead, Congresswoman Ross, 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you very much. This has just been wonderful. And I'm thrilled about our discussion about attracting more people to this vital industry. One other thing, and I've been on my soapbox about this, but I'd love to hear from all of you about it. We have a number of young people who we have educated in this country, and they are the dreamers, both undocumented and documented. So children of visa holders who are now having to self-deport at age 21. And they want to stay in this country. They've been educated here. They're highly motivated. And I'd like to know what your views are on having us just make them eligible to stay here and harness their talent and their industry and their desire to be in the United States with that talent as opposed to somewhere else in the world. For any and all of you.
I can jump in here to start. I can't really speak to policy exactly from my seat, but I can say that, high-skilled immigrants and students educated in the US are really critical to the workforce and to the global industry in general, and will positively complement the American workforce. So policies that preclude US technology companies from employing uniquely skilled immigrants and the elimination of opportunities for foreign-born or US educated STEM students is pretty counterproductive to the continued leadership of the US microelectronics supply chain. So even more concerning are policies that enable the training of many of the world's brightest minds in our colleges and universities, only to see that talent then be removed. So I agree with you. I think it's important for us to stay competitive in this space, but also to do it in a way that's supportive of our company.
Thank you.
I think I add my voice to Dr. Liss, in that respect. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, that we need to bring the talent or bring the workforce or bring the students from all different groups and populations. And I mentioned, the underrepresented and the veterans. So obviously, if there are more channel or more pipelines, then that would be most welcome. So I think that's an opportunity that could be explored.
Just like to add to my colleagues' remarks that it's all about meeting the workforce need. But so diversity of talent is wonderful for increasing the number of workers, but also for increasing the creativity of the innovations that we come up with. We all know that if we have a greater diversity of ideas in a room, the likelihood that we'll come up with something that's even more innovative than our competitors is higher. So I think including a wide diversity of students is important, not only to meet the workforce development need, but also to meet the need for talent and innovation to stay at the lead once we recapture it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Can I add something? Is that allowed?
Oh, I don't yield back. I reclaim my 1 minute and 28 seconds, and you may have all of it, Ms. Liss.
I didn't know all the rules. I just wanted to add to what Dr. Liu said, oh, now I totally lost my thought. I was so on. I was going to say there's a ton of studies about diversity of thought and leadership and even profitability at companies who look to hiring a diverse, from diverse communities and supporting that, especially on a rise to leadership as well. So diversifying is so powerful and important across the board. And I just wanted to make sure I said that because I think profitability for the companies is also a good selling point on the DEI strategies as well.
Well, thank you. And I think we should try to recruit and retain as much talent as possible in this country. It improves our competitiveness, it improves our innovation, and it improves our communities. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Excellent. And with that, we'll, I think Dr. Baird was going to not ask 5 minutes of questions. Is that okay with you, Jim?
Ask me that question again.
You're good. You're not asking 5 minutes right now. You're in listen mode.
I'm okay.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate you mentioning my love for the auto industry and my automotive background, because you are spot on that this is absolutely a topic that's near and dear to our automotive workforce. And, you know, Mr. Gonzalez talked about the Intel lab going into the new fab going into Ohio. Well, it's not in Michigan, but it's in our area. And that's one of the things we celebrate here is all of our Midwestern colleagues. And so we do have another colleague from the Midwest, Dr. Foster, who wants to ask 5 minutes of questions here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, first off, I'd like to just second everyone's endorsement of the concept of, you know, basically stapling a green card to a STEM PhD diploma, you know, particularly in things like chip design. And, you know, the Competes Act had big components of our Keep STEM Talent Act, which was essentially a proposal to do this, and not only for PhD theses, but master's theses and the full range of STEM skills that are necessary for a good integrated circuit design ecosystem. And, you know, at the national lab where I was, you know, operating or providing work at least for a lot of the chip design team at Fermi National Lab, we always found that a very diverse chip design team was tremendously productive. I mean, we had these, you know, these blonde all-American kids, and we had, you know, Palestinians, we had just everyone you can imagine. Contributing ideas on these chips that really were way beyond what was even available commercially, and so I saw that benefit up close of the diverse thought inputs. Now, if I could go back to the question of trying to get students' hands on equipment. Yeah, Dr. Liu mentioned correctly that when you have access to absolute state-of-the-art chip designs, you can't, you know, it would be crazy to let the kids have access to the actual fab equipment. You know, Intel cannot let that happen. We ran into that in high energy physics where, you know, even graduate students were not allowed to touch the detector because they'd have some bright idea and you know, disrupt the thing. And so that is reality. And you're also right to point out that it is the software that is really the high bar for entry. You know, back when I was designing integrated circuits, they had an open source tool called Magic, which maybe you remember, yes, which, you know, any university could download and submit a chip, and it was very open. But some of the intellectual property in the chip design software is some of the software that should be very closely guarded so that that technology does not go offshore. And so that is it's a real risk. We have to find a way to let you know, universities all over the country have access to that state-of-the-art software to build state-of-the-art chips, and yet not have the intellectual property escape. And I think cloud computing has the benefit. So that's part of the problem. And I think we can set up a very broad-based thing so that anyone in any rural college has equal access to state-of-the-art chip fabrication through access to the software. However, there's a second part of the problem, which is getting the next generation of IC process designers and just electronic device inventors and having them get access. And that's a tougher one, because I think you actually need to have physical access to the equipment. There is no substitute to be able to just walk into the lab, adjust the temperature of this or the time of this or the chemical reagents in this step and see how it affects device performance. And so what are the promising ways of getting that? I think it's unrealistic to distribute that to every college in the United States, but we have to have at least regional centers where within a reasonable, you know, day trip, you can come in and get your hands on that sort of equipment. And what are the promising avenues there, and the ones where the Competes Act may be a help? Yeah, Ms. Liss, do you want to take a stab at that? Or Dr. Liu, either one.
Dr.
You want to
Liss?
start?
Oh, thank you. Really quickly, we only have like a minute left. So absolutely, so part of the ASA's goal is to open up these, let's say 25 to 30 clean room facilities around the country so that students can travel not too far within a day to get hands-on training, because I think that's so critical, like you have explained. But I think we also can take advantage of advancements in computing, and this is a good research project that could be funded, for example, by the NSF, to develop digital twins, right? So we can actually create digital twins of equipment, of process flows. So students at these community colleges and universities that don't have clean rooms can actually start to play around with processes and try to build devices a little bit before they actually show up and play with it hands-on physically to make the most efficient use of their time and limited resources at the universities that do have these physical facilities.
And
I would
is
just
there
add
a big role for the national labs also in this? That was because that, you know, there are nanotechnology centers and so on that I know Berkeley's involved in that.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
And I would just add real quick that, you know, it's coming up with a lot of member companies as well, that we need more training centers to support their needs. So everybody's talking about where we could create hubs of training centers that could really help benefit and partner with the university system as well. So it's definitely a big topic of conversation across our member companies as well.
Yeah. And we have to find the right way to subsidize that, because it won't be a short-term driver of profits. And so we just have to recognize that it's a public good to have a highly trained integrated circuit design workforce. And that's the sort of thing where the government has to have a role. And I think we've made a mistake in not in being too purist that the market's the solution to everything here. There are times when we have to come together and produce a public good like a trained workforce. Okay, well, thanks much, and my time has expired.
Great. Well, thank you for the second round of questions. And thank you again to our witnesses for testifying today as we look to all the work ahead for this amazing industry, its complexities, the people, all of you who are a part of it. The record is going to remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from members and for any additional questions that the committee might ask of you, our witnesses. But at this time, 12:45 Eastern, the witnesses are excused and the hearing is now adjourned. Thank you all so much.